Hello, Jacob here, AuthenticGayBlog. This is hopefully the final video. I know it seems like a lot of videos, but this is a very big, important subject in terms of the care review, and I really feel strongly that if they are going to review the care system when they get around to doing it, because it's been delayed because of COVID, that it is done properly because it's so important. We're talking about 70,000 young people on average going into the care system every year, and that is a lot of lives that are impacted basically. And also I feel very strongly that as many care experienced people's voices absolutely have to be included in this. There's no good in getting the same old people around the table because you'll get the same old answers, as simple as that. Okay, so this is about leaving care. A very critical time for people who have been in the care system. If you remember, I gave the terrible statistics about, the more times more likely to be homeless, more time likely to be in the prison system, more times more likely to be selling sex, more times likely to die before the age of 25. This is because of, mainly because of that window of time when people are leaving the care system and they fall through the cracks, and they're more vulnerable for being a rough sleep and more vulnerable for being caught up in the criminal justice system. Okay, so when I left the care system back in 1987, I was earning, I think, £67 a week at the time, and the local rents were £35 a week. Not including bills, not including food, not including transport to work. So you do the maths. Okay. I kicked up a fuss. I stayed until I was 18 and a half, and thankfully I found what would be called supported lodgings today for £25 a week, and my food was included and I was cooked for, basically. My leaving care grant was £35 a week's rent and nothing else, and my social worker met me 6 months later, which they're not supposed to do, because I completely left the care system, only because she'd been my social worker all my life basically, so she cared. You see, today is better. They get what is called a leaving care grant, which some people see as a considerable sum of money, but when you think about what it's got to buy in terms of starting their life in the big bad world, big wide world, away from the system that brought them up, and I use the term brought up loosely, £1,500 to buy washing machine, oven, fridge, bed, all of that isn't a lot of money really, is it? And there's not much support given to sort of access, charity places or charity shops. And why should they go to a charity shop? Why should they get second-hand furniture and that? They deserve, some comforts at least. Now, the age of exiting the care system is different. If you're in kids' homes or residential care, it's 18. If you're in foster care, it's 21. And then there is some kind of support until you're 25. Now, this varies from local authority to local authority. It changed a couple of years ago in regards to the local authority supporting someone to do some educational activity or route into employment. It's not what I would call proper support. Anyway, in my previous job at the Care Leavers Association, I gave a number of talks and I'm very good at public speaking and presenting information, largely to an all-female audience, mainly because that is a makeup of clinical commissioning groups, the NHS and leaving care services. It was primarily the NHS because it was Department of Health funding. I would ask a question to the audience, and I would say, at what age, those of you who have children, at what age did you tell your children you will never see them again? They must leave the home, set up life on their own, and go. Was it 18 or 21? And they must not come back. And maybe if they were lucky, you will meet them for a coffee and a chat now and then. And the audience kind of like chuckled, that parent chuckle, like, oh, they're still at home, I wish I'd go, So they got the message that in the real world, usually people leave home when they can, and they leave home with a lot of support and a lot of love and a lot of care, and can always go back home, always rely on bank and mum and dad normally, groans went up around the audience, I still give my kids money, They have that luxury. Looked after children and care leavers don't have that luxury. Everything is cut by a certain age. By 25, it's all cut. By 21, 18 or 21, it's mostly cut, apart from if you go into education and employment. Mainly university education, you get a lot of support. Now, often, they're accommodated very poorly. Some are put in hostels. If you're a vulnerable young person at 16 or 18, you may have seen some of the TV programs about this on Channel 4 and BBC. You're 17 and you're put into a flat on your own, and there's no one around because you got moved from one place to another. So you were in, I don't know, say you were in Leicester, and then you got moved to a foster family or a residential home in Manchester. There's no one in Leicester anymore because you spent the last 3 years in Manchester, or you might not very know many people in Manchester. So normally social isolation is a huge issue, and when I did activities at the care leavers where we asked people who were leaving the care system what they wanted, most of them said, I want to feel that someone cares about me. I want to feel loved, because when they're put out there on their own, there's no one coming round to check on them or look after them or see how they are doing. No one to do that kind of thing that mum or dad would do if they were living at home. Check there's food in the fridge, check they've got their bills set up, check they've got their direct debits or the council tax and whatever it is all set up, check that the house was safe, look in on them, take them out for dinner or something, help them cook, all of these things. It's often lacking when kids leave care. Now, some people are placed in a hostel. How can you place a 16 or 17-year-old who is very, very vulnerable in a hostel with people who may have be on early release from prison, people who might have drug and alcohol issues? I'm not blaming these people at all. People who've got significant mental health issues, you place them in a situation that isn't safe for them, and they're vulnerable to a lot of things, a lot of exploitation and stuff like that. They should not be placed in that sort of accommodation. I really feel that some kind of supported lodgings is the way forward, for many of them, and that should be in place for as long as they need it, or there should be special, flats or accommodation that has a support built in with it for as long as they need that support. So a stage, not age approach, okay? Also, I feel there needs to be some kind of befriending service, and this is an idea I had when I was at CLA, that you get a volunteer or community organisation or a charity or whatever who provides this service. It's completely removed from a local authority. It's not part of a looked after children's services or care leaving services. It's completely separate, and it is mostly people who grew up in the care system. I'm sure there's loads of people who grew up in the care system who would want to do this, or people who were foster parents or foster carers, who aren't doing it at the moment and just want to help, but have the knowledge and expertise to support. And basically, it would be primarily for care leavers who've just left the care system, but it'd be for all care experienced people, even the older ones like me, who might just need someone to talk to, meet up for a coffee when we're allowed to meet up for coffee, that is, and talk about life, and just to sort of get someone who understands what it's like to have been in the care system and to feel alone and to feel isolated and feel separated from life, But for the younger ones, these befrienders will play a very important role. They will really support the young person as much as they can. So it's up to the young person. It could be they just want to go for a pizza and a chat on a Saturday afternoon, or they might want to go to the park or do an activity together, but the person will come into their life, they'd come into their accommodation, their flat, or whatever it was, and be of support to them, whatever that support might be, to help them feel less isolated and alone in the world, and help them to build up a network and build up skills and build up confidence in themselves, so they don't feel completely isolated and alone and separate from society, and it will give them someone to talk to who knows what it's like because they've been there, and they can share their expertise, help them, encourage them, take them to the supermarket to do food shopping and all that kind of thing, which is often lacking because, leaving care services are overwhelmed in what they're doing, and obviously, they're under pressure to get rid of a young person as soon as they can, and I will say it because that's pretty much what happens, and this will hopefully reduce the isolation. It will reduce the risks that they might have in terms of being exploited by people, because when you're a vulnerable young person, especially when you're a vulnerable young person who probably has complex post-traumatic stress injury, has some kind of underlying mental health issues related to the abuse or trauma they experienced when they were children, are at far more risk of being exploited than anybody else, especially if they've got no family around them whatsoever, and especially if they do have family around them who aren't very good for them, in terms of support and mental health. So these befrienders will reduce that because they will be able to talk to the young people honestly and openly about the risks that they are open to in terms of other people, and give them worldly knowledge to become worldly wise to these nasty individuals that prey on vulnerable people in order to get them into a life of crime or get them into being sexually exploited, So the accommodation is critical. No hostels, ever, no hostels. Never placed in hostel. Always placed in accommodation as far as they can, where it's near their social networks, if they built up social networks in their local area, It needs to be appropriate accommodation, not a flat on some estate in the middle of nowhere, It needs to be, places that is good for the young person, that's close to their employment, close to their education, if they're in education, if they're receiving medical support or mental health support, it needs to be close to where they're getting their mental health support. I know this is a lot to do, but it's important. It's so important, because you would not do that to your own child. And again, you need to ask that question: would I put my own child in this accommodation? Would I want my own child to live here? Would I say to my own child, well, go and live 30 miles away from your work? No, you wouldn't do that. So we need to come back to that question of, would I put my child there? So the people who are looking at this need to ask that question in their hearts and be honest. Would I want this for my own child? Would I put my own child in this situation? And if you wouldn't, then you don't do it. It's as simple as that. Because if it's not good enough for your own child, it's not good enough for other people's. The grants, I think, perhaps need to be more money, but staggered over a period of time, or you need to work with, the providers of the white goods, the ovens, the TVs, the sofas, the beds, maybe IKEA or whoever, I don't know, to get a hugely discounted price for the young people so that the money goes a lot further. You need to have a stage, not age approach, so the young person leaves when they're ready to leave and not sooner, and they're supported to be in that right place, and not put under pressure, which is often the case when they're put under pressure to leave at a certain point in time. And obviously there needs to be the work around learning independence needs to be completely there as well, and committed to in terms of supporting the young person. I have seen a few TV programs around this, one in particular. I remember this lad, and when he was so vulnerable, he was so immature, and I'm like, there's no way he's going to survive on his own in a little flat, kicking around, not knowing what to do with himself, and feeling isolated and vulnerable and alone. It broke my heart, it really did, and that is not what we deserve. It's not what the young people in the care system deserve. They deserve to have the best start in life they possibly can have, in order to be, as successful as they possibly can be, because the odds are stacked against them in some ways already, and we need to reduce that completely. Thank you.